Hey everyone, welcome back. We're with part 2. We're talking to the amazing Kristi McVee over in New South Wales, and we're hearing about her story. Now, she had forgotten the memories, and it's not uncommon for us as survivors from when she was 6 years old, and she apparently had told her grandmother, who then told her father, and she was removed just like that from the home. Isn't that beautiful? She went on to become a child abuse detective and a specialist child sexual abuse interviewer. And after that, she also worked with child sex offenders once they had been released, I think. And also, but wait, there's more. And as you know, survivors, don't pull that face at me. As survivors, isn't there always so much more that we're always doing? So take the win, be proud of who you are. Let's launch back in. Kristi, welcome back.
Well, thank you. Hey, I just have to correct you. I'm in Western Australia. New South Wales is a long way away.
Yeah, sorry. Western Australia.
Have you ever been over here, Gloria?
Yes, yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Very hot, but beautiful.
For you, it would be.
Yeah, all right then. Don't come to Auckland, New Zealand, because it's friggin' cold. Okay, so Kristi McVee, what would you like to look at? We've kind of looked at the impact. We've looked at PTSD. We've made a few links. Really, we're quite fabulous, aren't we? And we've also looked at, you've written your book. You've talked a little about your relationship with your mum, touched on relationship with dad.
Yeah.
Just looking at, I guess, you as a specialist, you did your specialist child interviewing. I'm interested in survivors, just breathe through this, please, but I'm interested in how you managed your work with the offenders. How was that for you? What did it bring up in you, if anything?
It's interesting. For most people, they really struggle to deal and talk with someone that they know has abused a child.
Yes.
So I was able to, I guess, compartmentalize that from the fact that my job was to ensure that I didn't ruin the case for a child. Or, I worked with them in two parts. So I would work with them before they were charged or and interview them, and I would work with them after they'd been released from prison, and go onto a child sex offender register where they were managed for 5, 7, 10 years, sometimes lifetime. So it was interesting for me and for people who probably worked with me, with that I was able to compartmentalize that. I could be very civil and very normal and talk like with them like a normal person, anyone else, because I realized that I had it could create a big problem for any kind of further cases. And in actual fact, early on, I was actually able to identify that you get more bees with honey, more flies with honey than with vinegar or salt. So I was always kind of very mindful of how I treated people, because it could come around and make my job easier and it did make my job easier. So for instance, I had cases where they thought that they were like manipulating me, and because we know that people who abuse children are master manipulators. We know that they gaslight people, they lie, they do everything in their power to make sure that they don't get caught. And they would lie, manipulate, try and gaslight me. But I always did my job to the point where I had enough evidence, if I could find the evidence and they were sitting in front of me, that I was able to generally disprove all of their lies. And I've had sexual assault offenders, child sexual abuse offenders who have lied. And then I've gone here and basically they look like idiots, and that's how they lost their cases. So it's hard for some people to deal with that. And my husband has always said to me, I don't know how you can deal with them. I would want to kill them all. And I just said, it was always I always was able to identify that it wasn't my job to, it was not my job. My job was to put them before the court, and the court's job was to find them guilty or not guilty. Don't get me wrong, there's so many people who get off, and there's so many people who need to be locked up, and the sentencing is nowhere near enough. And I'm sure New Zealand's similar to Australia. It's ridiculously appalling. I believe that child sex offenders, child sex offences and people who abuse children, it's worse than murder. And that's my opinion, because and sadly for the families of a person who's been murdered, they're the ones who live with the loss of their loved one, but the children who their lives have been murdered.
Yes.
And for me, I was always like, that was one of the hardest things. I think that was one of the most struggling things for me is that, I would charge someone, they would get found guilty and they'd get 3 years. Yeah. And a child and a family have to try and survive after that. They have to live with that. It's never enough.
Well, until the day they die, and hello, beautiful survivors, I see you. Till the day we die, there is an impact somewhere, and of course it will get less over time, but there's always going to be something that will surface in us, and that's whether or not we're triggered or have flashbacks or feel a bit hypervigilant or suddenly notice someone walking towards us who reminds us of an abuser. All of those things, Kristi. So I agree with you. I think this goes on. It casts the shadow, the length of a lifetime.
Definitely, and that's a great way to put it. And so for me, it was difficult, but it was also rewarding because I did my job, and I know that I had great integrity and and I did it with, the best of my ability. I don't, and again, dealing with child sex offenders on the other side, once they had been released from prison. I'm not sure about New Zealand or other places in the world, but in Australia, and especially in West Australia, they're not forced into any kind of mandatory counselling, or they're not forced into anything to help them rehabilitate. And so for me, that was really frustrating. In order for them to actually go through the process of, being rehabilitated or having some form of counselling, they would have to volunteer. And what sex offender is going to volunteer for that when they don't want to get bashed in prison, right? So most of them just don't tell anyone what they're there for, and they don't tell anyone, or they lie. So it was really frustrating. And quite often the ones that they were hugely frustrating, but I was able to, like I said, keep my composure, have integrity, because it was, I was there to uphold the legislation and law that was available to us. It does need changing though, and I would love to see some changes.
Oh, it's past time, but interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. And survivors, you may not thank me for asking the question, but I just wondered how a wonderful survivor like Kristi was able to manage all of that.
I don't know how now, because I'm more furious now, and maybe it's because my own abuse has come up in the last 5 years.
Yes.
And not only that, like, it's funny, whilst I was in the police, it was kind of like I had a force field around my body that made me like I was a little robot, a little soldier for the police, right? And that's what I had to do to survive in the police. But since leaving, I'm so much more louder about it. Yeah. And I'm allowed to have an opinion that isn't the police's opinion. And also when I was leaving the police, I realized prevention, because, and identifying, predatory behaviors. And that's what led me to write a book, because I was seeing the same things over and over and over again in that predatory behavior. So I was like, we need to prevent this. If we can educate people, we can help them understand what these people do, then we can hopefully prevent other children. And that's where we need to do more of this work.
100%, 100%. I love that. And Kristi, are you able to hold up your book, please, and tell us a little bit about it and where we can get it?
Sure.
Yes.
So it's called Operation Kids Safe, a Detective's Guide to Child Abuse Prevention. There's only a very little bit about my actual story in there, but I weave a bit of more of my life through the book. But it's really just a guide about what parents need to know. Because when I was in the police and leaving the police, I started writing ideas down about 12 months before I left. I didn't know I was writing a book, but I just kept writing things down. Found the book the other day. And I just kept thinking, if I know, like, hello universe, thank you. But I just kept thinking, if parents knew what I knew, because parents would come along with their children if they weren't the perpetrator, and they would be like, oh, I just wish I had known what to watch out for. I just feel so guilty. I just feel so much shame. Like, I should have known. I shouldn't have trusted that person. And again, part of my job was to manage not only helping the child, but helping the family, and hopefully giving them options of how to heal. And we know, I mean, sometimes parents are shit and they don't do a very good job. And they are, and one thing I saw a lot of, and again, I hope I'm not, being too forward with this, is that, some parents, when their child comes to them and discloses, they make it about themselves. And I'm sure survivors watching this can relate. And they make it about themselves. And I have been known to pull them aside and say, this is not about you. Yeah. You go and get help for your trauma and what's going on for you, but do not bring this and make this about you for your child. And that's what sometimes we need to remember, is that when our children are in crisis, and they need us to be loving them and helping them heal.
So you've just raised another great point, which is this, that often for a child who is abused, remember we talked a little bit about neglect and abandonment, and sometimes abuse can find a home. Sometimes for the parent, that immediately takes it off the child and makes it about them, and this is a teaching point, survivors. There's a little window right there, because if the focus is always on me.com, I'm not actually fully aware of what's happening to my child, am I? Because I'm looking in the mirror. So I think sometimes, Kristi, unfortunately, we can call it the wounded narcissist, we can call it someone with psychopathic tendencies, we can describe for Africa, but the point is, the child is the one that needs the resource and the support. And it's interesting for our survivors watching, so much of what's happened for some of us has been that whole Darvo effect. They're denied that it ever happened. It's done through attacking either their credibility or their state of mind. The R is reverse the order of victim and offender. Hello, suddenly the focus is not on the abuser, it's become on the child, and they're fighting and struggling to regain any equilibrium they can.
I'd like to just say quickly, as a police officer, I knew none of that. It's not taught to us, or it wasn't taught to me, and I really am disappointed that it isn't. And I look at it now and I'm like, they are like literally like trying to catch flies with chopsticks. And because they're not doing the work that needs to be done for survivors. And I think that's what made me a little bit different. And there's some amazing child sexual abuse detectives and child abuse detectives out there, and people who work in this space, and they do a really good job. They do the best job they can. But without that knowledge and that trauma-informed knowledge, how can they do the best? Every officer needs to be trauma-informed, because
100%. And they also know when they also need to know when they're being played.
Manipulated.
Well, this is what grooming is, isn't it? So Kristi, where,
can you get my book?
Where can we get the book, and what are you doing now?
So I wrote the book. It took me about 2 years, but it's available on Amazon at the moment, and Kindle and Audible if you want to listen to it. I did actually record it. And what I've done since writing the book is I've just been educating families, parents, adults, communities about predatory behaviors, red flags, early warning signs of abuse. Because for me, if we could just pick up on it quicker, you know, we can't always protect our kids and people that we love 100% of the time. But if we're a safe adult, if we are someone that our kids can come to when they know that something's not right, it's inappropriate, there's someone acting that makes them feel uncomfortable in their body, you know, their early warning signs. If we could just teach our kids, teach ourselves, and be that people, we've got a greater chance of, first of all, those people moving on to another victim. Unfortunately, that's the reality. And second of all, maybe if anything happens, we can pick up on it quicker, and the harm is minimized.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing. I'm educating people on that stuff.
That's great. And I'm hoping the police are part of that group.
Not yet. We'll have to work on that.
Yeah. It's interesting in our country here, beautiful New Zealand, with the underbelly, we have, our stats are, by the time a girl is 16, 1 in 3 will have been sexually abused.
It's very much the same.
Yeah, and for a boy between 4 and 6, boys will have been by the time they are 16. And my question to you is, what's the noise like over there about the overwhelming statistics Australia face?
Yeah, so our statistics are 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you saw all of the big hoo-ha in the last fortnight, but you know, there was a great research paper done, and they found the people who, it was an anonymous survey of 1,945 men, and they came up with the fact that 1 in 6 Australian men are attracted to children and teenagers, and that's made people really freak out. All the men are like, it's not every man. And then interestingly, last week, which has gone quite under the radar, the Australian Bureau of Statistics released some statistics around child sexual abuse, and 1.1 million women were sexually abused by 15. 47% of those women were abused between the age of 4 and 9 years old, first time. And out of that, that's just like, that was mind-blowing to me. And they had some statistics. So they worked out that only 16 or 17% of women ever come forward to police and report to police, and only 1% of men. So we've got some work to do.
There's a lot of work, but doesn't it, you know, what I call it, the silent endemic here, because the silence is deafening. Here we have, as I'm sure you do in Australia, children being strapped into a moving vehicle. If they're not, they are charged, they are convicted if this keeps happening. The chances of that actually occurring, a child being killed or hurt in a moving vehicle, are so minuscule compared to these statistics, and yet it's $1 billion marketing campaign. Do you spot the difference? See where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So come on. And then, of course, you and I could go down some little rabbit holes. We don't need to, but my question always comes back to, why? Why the silence?
Because who's profiting off us not doing anything? Don't worry, you know, if every survivor came forward and spoke up loudly, I wouldn't be shocked. But the amount of abusers out there that we know, we think that are great people. And I mean, one of the things that comes out of this is not every abuser is going to abuse every child they come across, and that it's just one of those things. And I know it's hard to hear, but you know, sometimes it's just because, it's just hard to fathom sometimes. I don't know about you, Gloria, but sometimes I get exhausted from it.
Oh, I do. I wish I had a bit of help here to keep doing what I'm doing, because I'm gobsmacked. There's a lot of darvoing that goes on as well for us as adult survivors, and survivors watching, this. Even as adults, you'll have people turn away because they struggle with the cognitive dissonance, which is the mental discomfort when child sexual abuse is mentioned, because NIMBY, not in my backyard, it doesn't. So, and also it's unpalatable, isn't it? But Kristi, we've only got a few minutes left. I know you're shocked. Could you please maybe give survivors some tips or ideas on kind of what helped you? What would you recommend to our beautiful survivor family watching as a way to manage their healing?
I found so much healing from writing my story down, even if I was never to have released it. I think if you were to write, it was so cathartic. I can't explain it, but it was cathartic because once I'd written it down and I realized, and looked at it on paper and went, oh my God, how much have I tolerated and put up with, and how much have I survived, and how amazing am I? Because we often minimize our trauma. We minimize our experience. I still do it to this day. I'm a people pleaser. I want to make everyone else happy. I want to help everyone else. But when something comes around and it's my turn to put my hand up for help, I'm like, no, I don't need it. And I think that's a survivor thing, because we're not used to being helped, or our trauma has been, minimized and justified by the people around us who did it to us. So writing down, or even writing letters to the people that hurt you. I have no contact with my stepmom anymore. My father and my stepmom broke up. I have no contact with their family, and I am quite comfortable with that. And if they ever hear this podcast, sorry guys, but got to do what you got to do. And I think that when you see when it's written down, it makes such a difference to just being able to go, I am a survivor. I am amazing.
Oh, you are. And you all are, you beautiful ones. So, Kristi, one other tip before we need to sign off, or anything you haven't shared with us, oh wise one, that you would like to.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to tell people to check out, obviously, the book, but also I've got a podcast myself, and it's for parents. So we talk about these topics, but we also talk about how to talk to your kids about, protective behaviors, what to watch out for, grooming. So it's a parents-based podcast. So it's called Operation CAPE podcast, CAPE standing for Child Abuse Prevention and Education. You can check out my Instagram, and Gloria's going to be on there soon. You can check out my Instagram, and I've got a TikTok where I share stuff over there as well. So TikTok COP81 is that handle for that one. But otherwise, just follow me on any of those.
Awesome. Hey, Kristi, it's such an honor. I feel so excited, and I feel very humbled to have had you with us today, and stay there, please. Audience, wow, you're real. Imagine you're reeling, because I am. There's so many things, but Kristi did talk about, how you can get more flies with honey than vinegar and salt, and she knew what she was doing, and I suspect there weren't many abusers or pedophiles that got away under her watch. She would have made sure that information was there. I also love the fact, not what it actually is, but I love the fact that she compared the child sexual abuse to murder, and actually how it's worse than murder, because at least when a murder is done, it can be, there's a beginning and an end, and it's finite. I'm a little bit paraphrasing, Kristi will forgive me. But whereas we know with child sexual abuse, the impact goes on. So incredible to have had her with us. And I hope for all of you that you're looking after your wonderful selves, you're safe here. So again, as we end, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you.